Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Hey there, friend. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, and I am so glad that you're here with us today for this episode of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. Now, today is a fun one because it's actually an interview that Holly did with our guest, Andra Erickson. And I wasn't able to be part of the conversation, so I got to go back and listen to this conversation, and I got so much out of hearing Andra share all the valuable insights and wisdom that she did. Now, she is a mom of multiples, and we talk a lot about leadership here on the podcast in light of our work, in light of our church or our ministry or our business. And sometimes we touch on the motherhood piece, but today we're going to dig deep into leading as a mom. And Andra's going to share her experience of being a mom of twins and some of the things she's learned in that journey. But I want to encourage you to still listen, even if you're not a mom of multiples or even if you're not a mom, because one of the things that I found super valuable about this conversation was some of the things that Andra talked about in light of how she has to take a step back and ask herself questions related to her kids and how she's leading her kids can really apply in any leadership situation. She also dives into the concept of thriving versus surviving, as well as dealing with guilt and shame, and why we need to redefine and have a different way of looking at self-care. So I think that you will get a lot out of this conversation, no matter what type of leadership role you're in, or no matter whether you have kids or not. But if you are a mom, and especially a mom of multiples, I know you're going to really relate to what Andra shares today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in to the conversation with Andra Erickson.
Well, Andra, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, Holly.
Well, we are so happy to get to know you and your leadership journey. So if you wouldn't mind starting us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what your life and leadership look like right now.
Yeah, my name is Andra Erickson, and I am a life coach for moms of multiples. I have twins. They were born 11 years ago, which is crazy to think about. And then I have a plus one, which what we call her, a singleton. She's 7. And leadership is there's so many different ways that we lead, right? As women. And I started my leadership journey when I was really young because my mom has MS. I'm the oldest daughter. And so I really had to shoulder a lot of the responsibilities at home. And so that really started my leadership. I was so grateful to be in a community and a church that allowed the youth to lead. We got to plan a lot of activities and teach at school, in Sunday school, and all of that kind of stuff. And so I did a lot of leadership there. And then as I've, gotten older and created my own home, obviously we lead a lot in our motherhoods. So I do that as well. And then I continue to lead in my church roles also. So there's a lot of leading that us women do.
You have a lot going on, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's fun.
You mentioned a little bit about your leadership journey, but if you could kind of bring us through your leadership journey all the way from back when you mentioned, like, you're the oldest daughter and your mom had MS, and maybe when you actually realized through that journey that you were a leader, the kind of light bulb went on and you said, oh, maybe I am a leader through all of this.
I am really lucky even though my mom did have MS, she really taught me how to be confident in my role as a woman. So she luckily got to still be with me kind of on the sidelines and guide and direct me. And so that, I knew I was a leader even when I was a teenager and had friends, and everybody would get together and say, hey, what do you want to do? And I would always be the one that's like, let's go do this and plan the whole thing and get it all organized. All of my high school friends, they always teased me that I was the mom of the group. But they really loved it because I had all of it planned and no one went hungry, and I always had the water, I always had everything planned out. And so
I love that.
That's where we started. I guess the light bulb moment was definitely in high school that I knew that I was a leader, and I didn't ever shy away from that. And I'm so grateful for parents who guided me through that and also helped me embrace it and give me those skills to be a true leader.
I love that. So what are some leadership lessons that you've learned along this journey? Some that really, when you look back, kind of really stick out to you?
I think one of the biggest lessons that, we can learn is to tap into our own intuition, to be guided by the spirit or intuition, like whatever people like to call it. If we can learn how to tap into that and not shy away from those God-given gifts that we've been given to lead, I think that's the biggest thing. I think we let, fear and overwhelm and I think it's mostly fear of being disconnected from other people block us from really stepping into who we are, and the fear of judgment, right? That we don't want to be judged for doing certain things, even though we think that it's the right thing to do. I think that that's probably one of the biggest lessons about leadership that we can take away from is that we got to tap into who we are and be our authentic selves so that we can lead how God wants us to lead, how he's guiding us and directing us in our lives.
Yeah, I so agree with that. I think that oftentimes we sort of look at other leaders that we really like, or we like how they lead, and we think, oh, I wish my leadership looked just like that. And that's great to have mentors and people that you're sort of aspiring to be like if they're godly and, are sort of deserve, I guess, that. But at the same time, we discount the gifts and sort of the innate leadership that God has put in us. I mean, we second guess so many times. So I love that you said that. So you mentioned that you are a life coach and a coach to moms of multiples. And so I would love for you to tell us, what is the difference between mothering singletons and multiples?
Oh, honey. Well, there's just so much it's just so dynamic, and everybody thinks, oh, it's double the work. No, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
And the emotional roller coaster that you can go on and get stuck on, and just the heightened sense of the things that you have to do, because these little kids, these babies, they need you. You are their everything. So parenting, raising more than one baby at a time, you just cannot even compare it to maybe raising two singletons. It's not even remotely the same. And so a lot of moms of multiples, they have a hard time connecting and understanding motherhood because they are looking to the moms that have just had a singleton, which motherhood is hard in and of itself, right? I'm not discounting anybody's motherhood journey. It is all challenging. But when we don't have somebody that has thrived in their motherhood, that is doing motherhood how we wished that we could do it, none of us get pregnant so that we can then just like grin and bear and survive motherhood. That's not what our goal is at all. But with moms of multiples, it is just the heightened sense of responsibility and exhaustion and overwhelm is so debilitating that I really love working with moms of multiples because I can help pull them out of that and really help them thrive in their motherhood instead of just survive.
I love that you said that. So if we could unpack this a little bit more. So what would you say are the symptoms of a mom who's surviving? And then what does it look like to thrive? And I think it's important that we define this because sometimes we get a little bit numb and sort of apathetic, and we don't even realize where we kind of fall on this spectrum. So I would love for you to kind of describe this and sort of set up our discussion of this spectrum a little bit.
So surviving is what I like to describe as like kind of like at the effect of your life, right? You're just going through the motions. You're just grinning and bearing it, white knuckling it, trying to get through each day. You don't feel like you have any control over anything, any part of your motherhood, and you're just trying to make it through. It's like you're treading water, holding two babies, and you're just trying to keep everybody above the water, and thriving is throwing ourselves a life raft and jumping in the life raft with our babies and going down the river. And you're still going down the river, but at least you're thriving. And thriving is not, this is the other piece that is tricky. Thriving is not having hard days. Thriving is a mindset that you create so that you can navigate those hard days as you want to navigate them. Not they just are happening to you, but you're in control of when the babies aren't napping or when they won't sleep at night or when the tantrum is happening. You are mentally and emotionally in control so that you can experience that how you want to experience it. You're always the type of mom that you want to be, not delegating that responsibility or those emotions to anybody else around you.
I just think that's so important that we, set that foundation. And what I think I heard you say, a lot of it comes down to either your perspective or your mindset. Would you find that that's true in the people that you work with?
100%. And those perspectives and that mindset comes from those deep-rooted beliefs that you've formulated over the course of your life about what a mom does, who she is, how she behaves, what happens, what she does in her day, all of those types of beliefs that you have about yourself as a mom, about moms in general. When you can unpack those and really get to know them and understand them, then you can either keep that belief because it serves you and it serves your children and it serves your motherhood, or you can start to change that belief into something that will serve you better in your motherhood and create the type of motherhood that you want to create.
Do you find that there are most common beliefs that in general most moms would have? Like, are there a top 2 or 3 that most moms of multiples that you talk to kind of deal with or struggle with?
It's so hard because society puts so much pressure on us, quote unquote, society, right? I love that we say society, and it's like we get to listen to society or we can do our own thing. But quote unquote, society says all of these things, right? And so I think that some of the biggest beliefs that we need to challenge and question is, I'm a good mom if, and then you fill in the blank, right? So often we tie our worth and who we are as a woman and as a mom to outside circumstances, things that happen outside of us. And I am always reminding my clients that we always make the best decisions in our motherhood when we always know we are a good mom. If you know deep down in your heart and your soul that you are the perfect mom for your kids and you have two different options, it doesn't matter which one you choose. You get to just decide and then go all in on that option. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that moms need to know and to really get deep down into their soul is that they are a good mom. Doesn't matter what, if the kids are crying, it doesn't matter if tantrums are happening. It doesn't matter how many dishes are in the sink or if the sink is clean. It doesn't matter if the car is washed or the car is dirty. It doesn't matter if you're eating fast food or an organic meal. You are a good mom. And then just listen to your intuition and make your decisions based on that.
Do you find that mothers, and I don't know if it looks different for mothers of multiples rather than mothers of singletons, but do you find that we hold ourselves to a standard that we don't really even look at? Like we're not paying attention to what this standard is. We don't even really know what it is, but we can feel the failure and we feel the guilt and the shame. But we don't actually take time to go, okay, well, what is this standard that I'm holding to? Is this actually what I want? Like this idea of success as a mother, is this truly what I'm reaching for? Do you find that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's just, we are so programmed in our world to be busy all the time. And we don't take enough time to pause and think about those kinds of questions and those kinds of really amazing questions that we can then look and make decisions. That's how we get back into the driver's seat of our motherhood, is by taking a look at it and saying, do I even like this? Do I like what I'm doing? We just did this actually yesterday with my kids. We have a dog. And one of the reasons why we got the dog is to help them develop responsibility. And so my twins are responsible for feeding the dog. And it is not going well. It has been a struggle. And we've tried so many different things. We've tried the consequences and the just asking nicely and the charts and all of the things, right? Mm-hmm. And so finally, I just pulled my husband aside and I said, hey, we need to take a step back. Is this actually accomplishing what we wanted it to accomplish?
Right.
And when you can take a step back from your life and ask those types of powerful questions, we get powerful answers. And the answer was no, we need to do this differently. And then we get to say, okay, what does that look like in our parenthood? What needs to happen? Mm-hmm. What needs to shift? What needs to change? Yeah. And then you go all in on that and you try that. And then you just ebb and flow. But yeah, 100%, we definitely have to take a step back in order to create our motherhood instead of just living at the effect of it. And we need to decide what we want, not just, it's like we're in the backseat of the car, just wherever we're going to go, like the car's just going to drive. And I'm always telling moms, no, let's get in the front seat behind the wheel and direct our motherhood where we want it to go.
Do you have any other sort of questions that will help us kind of uncover this? You had this sentence before earlier, I'm a good mom if, and then the blank. Are there any other really valuable questions that we can ask ourselves to identify what we're actually striving for, or as you put it, like what direction our car is even going in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things, we all want to be good moms, right?
Yeah.
I think that one of the challenges that we have is we feel like if our kids end up a certain way, then we've been a good mom.
Yeah.
And so I think one of those powerful things is questioning and getting curious about our kids' life. And maybe we aren't the ones that are in charge of their life, right? What is your role as a mother? What are you supposed to do for them here on earth? I believe that God is in charge of our lives and he guides and directs us. And children are not immune to that. He has them in his hands. He is guiding my children and directing them. And I get to love and teach and serve them and be a place for them to land so that they can learn the lessons that they need to learn in life. And so some questions could be, what do I make it mean when my children do, and then fill in the blank? Another question could be, what impact do I want to have on this child? Another question could be, if I am a good mom, always, what do I want to do in this situation? I think that some of those are it's so powerful for us to just ask empowering questions. And then God will give us empowering answers through scripture, through friends, through inspiration. He is there wanting us to ask him these amazing questions so that he can guide and direct us.
I love that perspective. And I think it's so important for any mom to kind of do this work. I mean, I do think that there's a unique situation for moms of multiples, but I think this is so important in all motherhood because there's so much to it and so many complicated layers to motherhood, right? So one of the things you kind of mentioned earlier was sort of the opinions of others or the opinions of society. And I think we're used to other people's opinions being placed on us unnecessarily. But I'm wondering how this is unique for moms of multiples and what advice you might offer to a mom that feels really oppressed by other people's opinions.
What I'm going to say is not just for moms of multiples, because like you said, yes, there's other dynamics and unique challenges with being a mom of multiples, but judgments from other people and people's words, it's not universal. Or it's universal. It's not just refined to moms of multiples.
Yes.
So, one of the biggest things that I am always telling myself and other moms of multiples is other people can say words, they can say a judgment. And when you allow that judgment to attach to you, then you're going to feel judged. When you are judging yourself, then you're going to feel judged. I'm going to give you an example. So this morning, I have a daughter who typically at night, she picks out her clothes. Well, last night she didn't pick out her clothes. And so this morning she didn't have the type of jeans that she wants. She wants to wear jeggings and she didn't have those in her drawer. Okay. So she had two other kinds of jeans that are softer, but they're not what she wanted. And then she had these like gymnastics capris. Okay. I live in Utah. It's like 30 degrees outside. And she did not want to wear her jeans. And she came out with this outfit. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? You cannot wear that to school. Are you serious? Like, you're not wearing that to school. And I had so much, like the thoughts that were rolling through my mind were, what were the teachers going to think? What are the kids going to think? What are all the other people going to think if I let her look like that? It was hilarious. She had these tall socks that are her brother's. She then had her wool socks because the brother's socks aren't that cute. So she had her wool socks on. And then there was a gap in between the tall socks and her capris because they were shorter. Anyway, she looked hilarious. Like the outfit I would have never in a million years passed off on. And I was judging the situation. I was judging her. I was judging me as a mom. I was judging all of it. And we were having this power struggle. And she finally said, Mom, why can't I just wear what I want to wear? And I said, well, it's because you look goofy, honey. And she goes, I don't care what anybody else thinks, Mom. And I went, oh, okay, good. I'm proud of you for that. I am 100% behind you. I was afraid of what other people were going to think of her and think of me. Then that made me act in a way that wasn't my best self. I was not being the best mom for her in that moment. She taught me, which I'm so very grateful for. Our kids often teach us things and we miss it. So I'm so very grateful for that. But when we allow other people's words to attach to us, that's when we're going to feel judged. And when we judge ourselves, that's when we're going to feel other people's judgments. And so we don't have to feel judged ever again. People can just say words and we can let those words just float on by like clouds in the sky. They can just roll on by. But it's when we are judging ourselves that we're going to attach meaning to that and then feel negative.
What a hard lesson to be able to step back and learn. I don't know how I would have handled that. So good for you. I think along the lines of this conversation comes the topic of shame and guilt. In my mind, it seems to feel like it comes along with motherhood as some kind of package deal, right? You get motherhood and you also get shame and guilt. So how do you coach women to work through this so that they're not weighed down by shame and guilt? Is it a piece to what you kind of already talked about with the judgment, or what else is there that would help us get through that?
So let's unpack. These are two very separate things. So we're going to unpack each of them separately. So let's talk about shame first. We all know that Brene Brown is the shame guru. And she describes shame in a way that I really love, especially as a Christian. So shame is I am bad, and disappointment is I did something bad, right? So I think that we are not using shame in an appropriate way as well in our society, because I know I am a daughter of God. I am whole and worthy, and there is nothing I can do that will ever take away any of that worth. I, as a human, am always good, but I do things that are wrong. And so we can build shame resiliency, which Brene talks about we need to be doing with ourselves and our children, by always remembering who we are and that we are not our thoughts and we are not our actions. We are daughters of God. And when we can really tap into that, that makes all the difference. But I do highly recommend us feeling disappointment. I was disappointed in my words and my actions this morning with my daughter and her situation, but I was disappointed for a minute, and then I learned from that lesson and I can move on. But it's only, we drop into shame when we feel like we are bad as humans. And Brene says, if shaming worked, I'd be all for it, but it never does. It never causes people to change. Love, acceptance, and understanding does. And we need to have way more of that in our motherhoods as well. We need to accept ourselves as we are. We need to love ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves. We need to be way more understanding and give ourselves way more grace. That's shame in a nutshell. Guilt. I'm going to get on a soapbox. You guys got me started with shame and guilt. So here's the thing. My mom never experienced mom guilt. My grandma didn't. My great-grandma didn't. My great-great-grandma didn't. That is a term that we have coined in our society that adds extra pressure to our motherhood. Mom guilt is just guilt that we experience when we are moms. Okay. So I love to teach that we just drop the mom part. Let's just put that part aside and let's just say, I'm feeling guilty. Now, guilt, I believe, is a good emotion. It's an emotion that guides us if we let it. And let me explain. Whenever I'm feeling guilty, I use it as a red flag. I say, whoa, 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 I'm feeling guilty. Why am I feeling guilty? Oh, I'm feeling guilty because X, Y, and Z. Fill in the blank. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm feeling guilty because my kids are on screens too much. Okay, that's a huge one right now. Okay, so then I say, okay, I'm feeling guilty because my kids are on screens too much. Then I get curious with it. Why are they on screens? Is it really too much? Do I want to change how I'm doing things? Maybe it's okay. Like you just get curious with why you're feeling guilty. And then you get to do it's like a fork in the road. You either go all in on what you're currently doing, or you change course. That's it. And then the guilt's gone. But it's this indecision. It's this, I'm just going to stay stuck in guilt because I don't want to look at why I'm feeling guilty. And then it happens in our motherhood. So then we call it mom guilt, and it's just a big to do. But it's not, it's really like you can feel guilt for just a short amount of time. And I like to really believe that it just is guiding me. If I feel like my kids are on screens too much, I just get curious and then I go all in on whichever direction I feel like we need to go in their life. So it's not necessary to be stuck in mom guilt. In fact, I like to use guilt to help me.
It sounds like a lot of what you're sort of talking about is really from a very biblical perspective, sort of conviction, sin, and repentance. And if we stay in that place where we are just feeling conviction and we don't actually act on that, then we're going to stay in a place that feels really negative and gross. Like we've just recognized it at this point. We haven't actually done anything with it. And I think in our society of unending grace, which obviously we have, we don't like to talk about those pieces, but it keeps us trapped and it keeps us chained to those things, shame and guilt. And so is that what I'm hearing you talk about, but just with different words, do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. When we can just be guided and take an honest look about our actions and what we're doing and be guided, then we don't have to stay stuck. We don't have to stay in that negativity, that we can repent and move forward. We can just change course, right? Repentance is all about just changing our behaviors, and we don't have to let that hold us down. And we really like to blame, quote unquote, blame motherhood for a lot of the challenges that motherhood has, but it's mostly because how society talks about motherhood and the perceptions of it. And we just feel so out of control in it that we then blame it. And then it just causes more heightened negative emotions.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like that. That's not why I think God wants us to have joy. He didn't create us and throw us down here on earth so that we can just suffer all the time.
Yeah.
Right. But repentance allows us to change and develop and grow, become like him.
And I think it's important here to just kind of draw a really decisive line between a couple of things. And I'd love your opinion on this, but there is a definite line when we're feeling guilt and conviction. And then there's a line of where we're holding ourselves to something that is not real. And we feel guilt and shame about those things. I guess those may not be the right words now that you've defined them for us, but we feel like we're a failure to some level of success. And that's not necessarily sin. Those are two different distinctions. So do you have any thoughts on that or anything further that you would want to clarify there?
Well, we have, the sins of oppression and the sins of omission. And so we have it's the things that we know, like the commandments, like that we're not supposed to be doing, but it's also the things that we know we should be doing that we're not doing. And I think most of us fit into that bucket, that God is trying to help us and guide us into doing the things that we know we should be doing and that he wants us to be doing so that we can have an abundant and a more fulfilled life and a life that's devoted to him. I think that that's where he's mostly trying to guide us and direct us. It's not really necessarily, I mean, probably on this podcast, especially the big sins, you know what I mean? And so I think that helps us to just be able to take a step back and allow us to say, okay, I'm okay. I am whole and worthy, but what do I want? What can I do in this life? What is God guiding me to do? And just seeking for that revelation is huge in our life and in our motherhood.
So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that we hear a lot in our society. And as you kind of talked about it, I realized, like, as you were talking about the mom guilt thing, as generations past, this is a term that we've coined as well in this generation. That's self-care. So my mom didn't do self-care. Her mom didn't do self-care, that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So what is your definition of self-care?
So I love the idea of self-care. And my definition is completely different than most, actually, which is like a lot of things, let's just be honest. But I like to define self-care as things that we do for ourselves to fill our own. I think there's a huge distinction between self-care and taking care of ourselves. And I think that we need both. We deserve both in our life, right? Taking care of ourselves is like eating healthy food, drinking enough water, getting our exercise, having shelter, having clothes, like all of that kind of stuff is like the taking care of ourselves. I also think there's two different buckets within self-care. And there's the self-care that propels us forward, and there's the self-care that is just for fun. And most of the self-care that we talk about is the just for fun self-care, going to the spa and going out to lunch with girlfriends, and that kind of self-care is not as impactful and necessary. Yes, it's fun and it's good, and I'm not discounting it, but we also need in equal amounts this type of self-care that propels us forward. And that's the quieting our mind and doing something that helps us move forward and develop ourselves, whether that's, reading a book or listening to a positive, uplifting podcast or going on a walk or going on a hike there's all sorts of meditating and all sorts of things that we can do for our mental and emotional health to propel us forward. And that's the distinction that I like to make with self-care. I think that we need all of that. We need to be taking care of ourselves because these are our bodies that God has given us to house our spirits. Like, we need that, but we also need to take care of our mental and emotional health. And that is how we do self-care.
I love that distinction because I think so often it gets a bad rap. And I think to talk about it effectively, we really need that definition. So, but I would love to get your opinion. What would you say to the person who says that self-care is selfish and that we as Christians should die to self?
So I am constantly telling my moms of multiples that self-care is the least selfish thing that we can do. I mean, it's the cliche, oxygen mask in the airplane, but it's really true. If we don't have ourselves filled up in a way so that we can give to others, there's nothing for us left to give. And so to run ourselves ragged, trying to meet the needs of everybody else does nothing for ourselves. And it's not even helping the other people in an impactful way that helps the other people in a bigger way. And so we have to be filling ourselves up so that we can give. And that's how we do that, is with self-care. And so I know that people say self-care is selfish. And when I take a 30-minute walk by myself. I don't even take the dog. It's just me and my thoughts and communion with God. That is more powerful. I am a kinder, loving, respectful, like I am a better human being when I can just take a minute and fill myself mentally and emotionally up. And so it's really a lie, to be honest. It's a lie that it's selfish. It's the least selfish thing that we can do. And if you aren't participating in self-care, you're doing yourself and those around you a disservice.
So I would say that for moms in general, self-care is something that is hard to find time for, but I would assume it may be even more difficult for moms of multiples. So do you have any practical tips for moms, whether they be of singletons, of multiples, whatever? Do you have any practical tips for moms to find time and make space for that in their life?
Absolutely. So one of the reasons why we think as when we are talking about self-care and we think that it's so hard is because we're trying to do an hour's worth of self-care a day or in a week or whatever. We're trying to get, we have to schedule the babysitter or we have to schedule a partner to come and make sure that the kids are watched. And we have to do, it's like this big thing on our calendar. And what we're missing is that 5 minutes of journaling, 5 minutes of meditation, 5 minutes of reading a uplifting book is a better use of our time as with moms of little kiddos. So my number one tip is to stop scrolling social media. Put a timer on your phone, on your devices, and use that time that you were scrolling for self-care and show our kids. Here's the thing. We have to show our kids how to take care of themselves mentally, emotionally, and physically. And if we aren't participating in self-care, if they're not seeing us doing the things that take care of ourselves, they're not going to learn how to do it either. And then we're just going to perpetuate the anxiety and the depression and all of the chronic mental health challenges that we're dealing with. And so we have to be the ones that say, no, enough is enough. Social media isn't filling you up. There are obviously really good things about social media. There's some really cool stuff about it. But there's also a lot of scrolling, a lot of, comparison, and a lot of negativity that's on there as well. And so when we can shift our time and use it in a way that is useful for us, it is a huge blessing to your life. So that's probably my number one tip. The other one is go to bed. So often when I had little kids, I would stay up, like they'd go to bed and I would stay up late watching a show or whatever. And yeah, it was nice, but then I was always exhausted and tired. And then I was groggy getting back up. And so I think that sometimes we need to reevaluate the use of our time, and checking out with a show every once in a while. I'm not saying that that's a negative thing, but just reevaluate your habits and decide if, maybe I could shift in these little areas to make time for self-care. I go to bed early so that I can get up before my kids so that I can have time for myself. I like to get up and I journal and I read my scriptures and I typically meditate before or once they've gone to school. But when I had really little kids, I would get up, even if it was just to just sit in a chair and be quiet for a minute before they woke up. And it just gives your mental the stimulation that our brain cannot handle all of this stimulation that we're giving it, which is why we have so much anxiety and depression and overwhelm in our society right now. And so we have to do a better job at quieting the noise. And self-care is a really cool, amazing way of doing that.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head when it comes to your 2 tips. But I'll be honest, I think that it might be something we don't want to hear.
I know. I do know that.
But sometimes we just need to have that sort of self leadership where we step back and say, okay, if someone else came to me with this problem, what are the things I would say to them? And then have a little bit of a taste of our own medicine. And it's hard to do sometimes, but I think it's so important that you kind of lifted up those 2 things and just really speaks to some of us about this. I think that so often, I know, like as you were talking about going to bed, I really like that time at night that, I feel like I'm alone and I feel like that's the time I get my time alone. But you're absolutely right. I'm exhausted the next day and that sort of thing. So I think it's really important. I like the little spur that you've given us, the little push that we need to really examine that. So I appreciate that.
I just want to remind everybody of our little chat about guilt. Remember, This is the red flag going up. So if you're feeling guilty, it's not my fault. Just get curious and decide what you want to do in your life.
Oh my gosh. I love that. Spoken like a true coach. That's so good. All right. So as we kind of wind down, I'm wondering if you could talk to us about how important it is for moms of multiples to find a community with other moms of multiples. And maybe this actually could kind of speak to, moms with kids with disabilities or, any type of sort of niche or little sort of subset of motherhood. Why is that important to find someone that's going through the same thing as you?
It really is because it helps you realize that you're not the only one going through this challenge. You're not some unique, snowflake that only this is happening to. But I also want to offer a word of caution here because in a lot of the mom groups that I am a part of, there is so much negativity about motherhood, about partners, about kids, about everybody just feels like they're a victim in a lot of these communities. And so I really want to, yes, it's so important to have a community where you can share your struggles, but I also want to remind you to also empower people to change and to grow and to solve their problems, and to take action on their life so that they don't stay stuck. Yes, motherhood is hard, but it doesn't have to be. Yes, being a mom of multiples is challenging, but it doesn't have to be harder than we are making it. And when we throw out our challenge in a group and everybody, jumps on board, you just feel validated for a minute, for just a hot second. And then you turn off the screen and you have to go back to that hard challenge that you just described. And that's what I love about coaching is that moms come to me and they throw all their stuff at me. And then we take a look at it and we empower them to change make the little shifts that they need to make, but they're so in it that they can't even see that there is a solution to the problem. And so, yes, find somebody that you can talk to and communicate with, no matter what is going on in your motherhood. Just like you said, with the disabilities, or if you're raising children that aren't in the same race as you, or if you're raising children who are adopted, or whatever the case may be, there's groups out there, but we also want to make sure that we take control of our motherhood, no matter what situation is happening, because we are in control. It's whether you're in the back seat of the car or in the driver's seat is up to you.
Yeah, I love that sort of caution as well that you kind of gave us, because I do think that we tend to look to those groups for that validation, but then we leave not feeling encouraged or uplifted in any way. And I think it's a really good sort of stop and checkpoint to go, okay, I came here for X reason. And now am I getting that? Or what else am I getting part and parcel with that? Like, what's the package deal here? Am I getting validation and discouragement and sort of commiserating with other people? Or am I getting encouragement and tips and tricks and maybe some things that I can think differently about? And so I love that caution and that sort of check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Exactly.
So just one or two last questions. We believe on this podcast that leaders are learners. And so we love to chat with our guests about this because oftentimes they have really great resources, books, podcasts, anything like that they've been learning from recently. And we'd love for you to share that with our audience if there's something that's been impactful to you as of late.
I've been reading the Dare to Lead book by Brene Brown, which is hilarious that we already talked about her, but I love that book. And I think the biggest lesson that it has given me is that we've kind of touched on this already, is that we need to be who we are. We need to show up as our true, authentic self, come what may, come the judgment, come the criticism, come whatever, but we need to step into who we are. And so often we don't even know who we are because we're so used to people pleasing. We're so used to just doing what other people think we should. We think that other people think we should do. We don't even know who we are. You know, a lot of the terms that we use is I get lost in my motherhood. Well, how do you know who you are if you're lost, if you don't even know what you like, Yeah. And so I highly recommend, taking some of that self-care time to journal about who you are as a woman, as a leader, what seems authentic and real and true to you. And don't shy away from that. Like we've talked about, those are the God-given talents and abilities. And He wants us to use them so that we can bless the lives of His children around us. That's one of my favorite books. So I've been rereading it and I really like that one.
I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've actually gotten through a full book of hers. So I need to sit down and I think I have some on my shelf that I need to revisit.
Yeah, she's pretty incredible. I really like her teachings.
So as we are coming down to the close, I would love it if you could let people know, our audience know, how they can connect with you. And if there's anything that you'd like to share with our audience, feel free to let them know where they can reach out to you, where they can find your resources, that sort of thing.
I just like to tell everybody to go to my website because it's all there. So just go to AndraErickson.com. Andra is AndraErickson.com, and you'll find, the social media. There's free resources there. Learn how to coach with me. Right now I have one-on-one clients, moms of multiples that are listening, or if you know a mom of multiples, I promise they will love you for getting in contact with me. That's where you can send them.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking your time today to chat with us about this. I think that whether we have moms of multiples or just any mom listening, and even if you're not a mom, I think there's so much here about just life in general that we kind of let stick to us that, doesn't really need to be there. So I so appreciate your encouraging words to our audience. And I just thank you so much for your time.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, come and join us in our private Facebook community. We would love to get to know you better so that we can make sure the podcast is providing what you need. Plus, you can share your questions and ideas, and you'll be surrounded by incredible Christian women leaders. To join the group, visit estherlittlefield.com/group. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.